Okay, so before we get things started, I wanted to clear up a couple of things about my stance on the Snyder Cut of Justice League. In the intro of the last video, I made it sound like the sheer concept of the Snyder Cut existing was stupid and dumb and that there was no way it was going to change anything. However, one of my friends kindly informed me that about 80 pages of Justice League was reshot by Joss Whedon, and that of Snyder's footage, only 10% of it is used. Now, obviously, this would mean that the Justice League is, in essence, a completely different movie. So the Snyder Cut will be completely different. So thank you to my friend for that piece of information. That does help make an informed decision about what I'm going to be going into when I do watch that. And for the record, I do believe that the Snyder Cut happening is in some ways a good thing. I might dunk on Snyder a lot, but at the end of the day, I will always maintain directors' rights to the final cut, and Snyder deserves to see the film that he made get finished the way he intended it to. That said, I still think his DC movies are ass, and I'm still gonna shit on them, so let's get into it. The year is 2016. It had been 3 years since a DCEU film had been released, and part of me had forgotten it even existed, preferring to watch the Marvel movies that were coming out more frequently, though I had been disappointed by the quite sub-average Age of Ultron. Through 2015, I'd been hearing about an upcoming Superman vs. Batman film, and my interest was piqued. This was a movie idea that had been around for ages at this point, and I was curious as to how it would be done. The first trailers came out, and immediately I was concerned. Lex Luthor sounded like he was on crack. More of Snyder's trademark destruction porn seemed to be on the line. The introduction of Doomsday was in the trailer, and of course, Batman holding a motherfucking gun. But at the same time, I was still hopeful. The battle between the two greatest heroes ever looked to be interesting, and Wonder Woman, much as I didn't quite understand what she was doing there, looked pretty friggin' badass. And the movie happened. Now, I won't discuss the theatrical cut here at all because I feel like that would be quite unfair to Snyder. That was not his preferred version of the film, and it has significant issues with it due to half an hour being haphazardly cut out of it without any thought to the actual plot of the movie, as such as it exists. Here, I will be discussing the Ultimate Edition. However, I feel like I should stress that just because the Ultimate Edition is the complete version of the story doesn't mean it always makes sense or is particularly good or anything. All right, let's get into this. I will once again begin with the things I liked in this movie because across the 3-hour runtime, there were moments that I did like. I mean, even these moments I liked had problems attached to them, which I will go into later, but as it stands, here's what I liked. Once again, the score is one of the best parts of the film. Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL crafted something pretty amazing here, and I still listen to parts of it from time to time when I'm writing. For me, the best part of the funeral sequence was the score behind it. It's genuinely beautiful and quite moving, and I take my hat off to Zimmer and Junkie XL for it. Also, Wonder Woman's theme never fails to get me amped up, because that shit goes hard. Also, much as I have narrative issues with it that I will get into later, I think the scene of Clark and Superman's funerals, it's pretty well directed. It has a couple of moments of self-indulgence, but for the most part, it's pretty well shot and directed, and there's some really nice moments in it too, like the piece of information that Bruce was the one who paid for Clark's funeral. For me, that's the most in-character thing that he does in the entire movie. The scene of Bruce in the Metropolis is kinda neat. It's a good move to begin the film with a human perspective of the events of Man of Steel, and it does set up Bruce's motivations for being concerned about the power Superman has over everybody. It's also here that we see Bruce run into a debris film in a desperate attempt to save anybody who might have survived a collapsing building, and not gonna lie, that's pretty freaking badass. We also get to see a more human side of him, that he's genuinely worried about the employees of his company. I like that. The explanation for where kryptonite comes from is probably as good as any. Having the kryptonite be irradiated remains of the world engine's actually kind of neat, and it does serve to connect the universe together pretty well. The scene where the police find that branded trafficker is, for the most part, done pretty well. There's an almost horror-like tension to it that I kinda like. And sure, the movie almost immediately shits on it with Bruce scuttling across the ceiling like fucking Spider-Man, but up until that point, I was really digging it. I like Jeremy Irons as Alfred. There aren't many characters in this movie who are faithful to their comics counterpart, but Alfred's "I'm so tired of this shit" attitude does feel pretty in character. In fact, I'd go as far to say that Alfred is the only person in this movie has a brain cell to use. And finally, the fight scene where Batman saves Martha is pretty badass. It's well choreographed and Batman feels genuinely powerful here. The scene still shits on itself in the end, but when it's good, it's pretty great. Characterization of Clark Kent is somehow even more off the mark in this movie than it was in Man of Steel, and that, my good fellows, is one hell of an accomplishment. Now, to begin with, it seems they try to show Clark as the savior that Superman is supposed to be. There's a half-decent montage where we see Superman saving an assorted collection of people in trouble that begins with Clark seeing on the news that someone has been left for dead and him leaving a party to go and save her. That is the Clark Kent I know and love from the comics and other shit. It's a shame then that the rest of the movie doesn't do that, and at parts flatly contradicts that. The hardest part about criticizing the character development of Clark in this movie is that he barely gets any. Everything he does is simply because the screenplay tells him to, and as a result his character switches violently from scene to scene. There's a vague thread of him wanting to take down Batman, but that thread seems to disappear from the film about halfway through. And what does happen in this section of the movie is ridiculous. The part of Clark wanting to do some investigative journalism is fine, but the bit where he first confronts Batman is some grade A bullshit. Like he shows up, smashes up the Batmobile, and then threatens physical violence against Batman if he keeps Batmaning. Like, look at the rage in his eyes. He looks like he wants to kill him right then and there. And this is a major issue with Snyder's version of Clark Kent. He seems to revel in violence. For the comics Clark Kent, violence is a last resort, not a first one. Like, take the bit where he goes to Naomi to save Lois. He could have easily disarmed these terrorists quickly by zooming their guns out of their hands or something and maybe knock them out with a nice little tap to the head. Instead, he rams this guy through a series of walls. Like, that guy's fucking dead. And then when he confronts Lex Luthor on the roof, he not only says he thinks Luthor deserves to be murdered brutally, but then lights up his eyes ready to heat vision his face off. And then he has the nerve, the gall, the fucking audacity to get mad at Batman because he's going off script and being too violent. The end result of this is when we have that Injustice Premonition dream sequence, I don't really feel anything because it feels way too easy for this version of Superman to become that. That's not a good thing. And then there's the scene at the committee where the dude in the chair blows up and kills everyone in the hearing. Everything that happens in this and right after this is wrong. So first of all, the sheer concept that Superman would let that explosion happen is absurd. Now we know that the man's chair was lead lined to prevent Clark from seeing the bomb through it. However, this also raises the issue of why Clark would see something lead lined and not go, hang on a minute, that's a little bit suspicious, I wonder what's going on over there. But then we get to the seconds before it where Senator Finch sees the Granny Peach Tea label on the jar of piss, and boy howdy, I will be coming back to the jar of piss. There is clearly a moment when everyone in the room knows something is wrong, and yet Clark continues to just stand there. Wouldn't it be a good idea to, I don't know, clear the room? You can move at super speed, my guy, it could be done. And then when the bomb does detonate, he continues to just stand there, doing nothing. Like, homie, you got dead people and probably some people who are still alive but won't be for a whole lot longer. You want to just get on that instead of standing there contemplating the consequences of your actions? And then he does save like 1 or 2 people, and then he fucks off to go hide on a mountain and contemplate his place in the universe. If there's something I know about Clark Kent as a character, it's that he would never, ever leave the scene while there are still people in danger. If he was going to mope about or consider his place in the universe, he would do that well after the building was fully cleared and he'd done everything in his power to help these people. Fuck. I could continue to rant about this all video, to be honest, but this bit is already running long as it is, so let's keep moving. The characterization of Bruce Wayne is also inconsistent and pretty shoddy. There are moments of greatness, which I listed earlier, but for the most part, it's pretty rubbish. Now I'll get this point out of the way quickly because I feel like it needs to be done quickly. I think with the material given to him, Ben Affleck is doing a fine job. His performance is pretty good, and I would have definitely liked to see more of him in a much better movie. However, that doesn't make up for the material Affleck is working with, so let's get into that. I have a pretty basic litmus test about whether Batman is good in a movie, whether he kills people or not. If he doesn't, congratulations, the movie makers understand the basic point of Batman and understand his character. If he kills people, then the writing of his character is automatically bad. It's that simple. And this Batman kills a lot of people. Now I know Snyder tried to clarify once they tried to have him indirectly kill people, but making allowances for him to kill people at all still shows a fundamental misunderstanding of his character. Just admit the only reason you want to make for these allowances so you can have cool car chases with lots of guns. And also on that point, there is nothing indirect about these kills. Like Batman riddles this car with bullets and then it crashes and crumples like a ball of tinfoil. Batman did that. He killed them. No ifs, ands, or buts. And that is bullshit. And again, with the fight scene in the warehouse. Was this fight scene badass? Yes, it was. But like this guy who gets his head smashed in with a crate, if he lived, I'd be surprised about it. And then Batman uses a gun to destroy this guy's flamethrower so he burns to death. In other words, he killed him. Editing Michael with a couple more points. In the discussion I've had a couple of people while preparing for this video, a lot of people have brought up The Dark Knight Returns and how Batman uses a gun to kill a couple of people there. I would like to start off by saying that Dark Knight Returns isn't canon, but that's probably not the best way to write it off. The second point is that The Dark Knight Returns actually goes into a lot of detail about why Batman ends up going that way, and even by the end, he still can't commit to murdering the Joker because that's not who he is. I am aware that Batman has bent his no-gun rule a couple of times in the past, but like, you really actually have to have a fucking good reason for it, and Zack Snyder has no good reason for it here. here. In this movie, he could have saved Martha without blowing up that flamethrower guy, and he definitely could have done his job with Luthor without killing 30 plus of his goons in the Batmobile with a machine gun attached to the Batmobile. And then there's this whole branding thing. This brand he uses on people acts as a sort of death sentence, so anyone who's branded gets murdered in prison. Now, it would be one thing if Bruce wasn't aware of this. That would have been fine, but he does know, to the point that when he shows up to brand Lex, he says he's gonna have him transferred to Arkham, where he knows that Lex would be murdered on sight for his brand. And then there's the fact that his whole character thing through the movie is, I want to kill Superman. And look, I get it, his character's concerned with Superman's omnipotence. That on its own makes sense, but the fact that Bruce would ever consider murdering anybody, would consider planning a murder, is just not the vibe. And look, I can hear these people saying, well, he's older and more jaded, so he's a lot more lethal, specifically in response to the fact that the Joker had killed Robin in this universe. But in the comics, Batman has watched people die over and over again, and seen all manner of horrible shit, and has never become a murderous anti-hero. And yes, in early issues of Batman comics, he did kill people, but then the no killing rule was introduced, and it became an integral part of his character. So instead of trying to make excuses for him to not follow that rule with off-screen bullshit or whatever, just follow the rule. Should be the easiest thing in the world, and yet barely anybody seems capable of sticking to it. Fuck. When I think of Lex Luthor, I think of a man who is in complete control, calm, even-headed, and whilst probably a little loopy, completely in control. And I'm going to be completely fair to this movie, I'm yet to see a movie that gets Lex Luthor right. Much as I love the Reeves Superman movies, their version of Lex Luthor kinda sucks too. The best Lex Luthor I've seen in live action so far is the one in Smallville, because even though he isn't quite the villain he is in the comics yet, the path he takes to get there shows a far better understanding of the character than anything else I've seen in live action. All that said, this version of Luthor is just fucking awful. Now, I will give some credit where credit is due. The movie does at least get Luthor's rationale for hating Superman right. A theme of a lot of modern adaptations of Luthor is he doesn't trust anybody who has absolute power, and as a result, he wants to rid the world of Superman. That's all well explored here, and even the hints at Luthor being abused by his father add a little dimension to that idea. That makes sense. What doesn't make sense is Eisenberg's frankly bizarre performance. Had this motivation in the script been paired with a more calm and collected performances, I probably wouldn't be as mad as I am. But here we are. The Luthor in this film behaves in a manner that looks way more like the Joker than it does Luthor. The tittering, the high-pitched voice he breaks into at seemingly random moments, the bizarre, stilted dialogue he has, which could be just Zack Snyder, to be fair. I do not believe for a second that he is the CEO of a massive tech corporation. Instead, he seems to me like someone who can barely keep himself together. It's a performance that's at odds with everything else we know about Luthor, and it's just bizarre. And while we're on the subject of Luthor, let's talk about his plan, because it's kind of ridiculous. It's clear that this was supposed to be on the level of the several plans Joker has in The Dark Knight, where if one fails, another comes into play. But here, it's not only bizarre, but it's almost incoherent. So let's have a look at it, shall we? So the first part of his plan is to discredit Superman with a special bullet used by a double agent in Nairobi to kill a bunch of terrorists and make it look like Superman did it. But how did he know that Superman would be here for this to work? Did he know that Lois would be sent here? And more to the point, how did he know that Superman would fly to Lois's rescue? And for the most puzzling is all, how does this plan hold up in the slightest? Sure, Lex has his men burn the bodies of the terrorists, which I assume is supposed to look like Superman's heat vision, but even the most basic of forensics would be able to show that these people were killed by bullets. How would that in any way, shape, or form implicate Superman? And then there's the congressional hearing that was called about this incident, where Luthor has that man go in with the bomb to blow himself up and again make it seem like Superman did it. But again, what's his logic here? Was the nonsense in Nairobi just to get Superman into Congress? But that would rely on them believing that he did kill those terrorists, which again, forensics would prove wrong instantly. So his plan seems to be now to implicate Superman in the explosion of Congress. Which, how? The only reason this even begins to work is because Superman just flies off afterwards instead of helping people. And then we find out his ultimate endgame was to have Superman and Batman fight, which also doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, why does he want Batman to kill Superman? How does that in any way, shape, or form serve his purposes? Surely a much better plan with better chances of success would be to make a kryptonite weapon of his own, lure Superman out, and then kill him? And also, why would he want Batman dead? He knows damn well there's a high chance of Superman just killing Batman in the setup we've been given in this movie. So what does he have against Batman that he also wanted him to face death in this situation? This fight between Batman and Superman is supposed to be this epic moment, but it only really happens because. And finally, Luthor's backup plan for if Batman died in the fight was to create a monster powerful enough to kill Superman. So let's think about the whole logic behind that one. To defeat a being that he sees as being too powerful to trust that he thinks will one day turn around and kill everyone, he creates a monster that, once it's killed Superman, will probably turn around and kill everyone else anyway. anyway? What was his plan to deal with that? Remember, he's fresh out of kryptonite because Batman has it. So what? It's a complete shambles of a plan that was clearly written just for the big fights to happen and not to make any internal sense. And that flies in the face of the clever Lex Luthor that we're supposed to have? I just don't understand. I legitimately do not understand why Diana Prince is in this movie. Now, do not get me wrong, I love Wonder Woman. I think she's a kick-ass superhero, and her 2017 film is so far one of my favorites in the DCEU. The problem is, as much as I like seeing her in this movie, I can't for the life of me figure out why she's in this movie. Let's go over what she does in this movie. She shows up at the party in Metropolis to steal a hard drive that Bruce is using to steal information from LexCorp, because Luthor has information about her. She then gives the hard drive back to Bruce, saying she can't get into it, so it's left to Bruce to decrypt the hard drive and then find a Wonder Woman promotional photo and some Justice League teaser trailers. He then emails all of this to Diana for, why does he do that? I get him emailing the photo of Wonder Woman to her because that is what she was looking for, but why bother emailing to her all of the teaser trailers? Is it only to set up a future movie? Because I think it's just to set up a future movie. And then Diana shows up at the big final battle with Doomsday because now in a shared universe, this does make sense. It's a bit of a meme to ask in MCU movies, oh, why didn't this guy show up? Why didn't that guy show up while watching standalone movies? But the biggest issue with that is if you're going to try and tell a story that does involve multiple heroes for it to stand alone as its own film as well as being part of a whole, that hero's presence has to be felt throughout the whole movie. And Diana's just isn't. For most of her screen time before showing up at the Doomsday battle, she seems like an afterthought. So seeing her suddenly appear in the fight in full battle gear is a little jarring, narratively speaking. And this is actually the DCEU's biggest failing summed up here nicely. They tried to hurtle into the whole Justice League movie with nowhere near as much setup as the Marvel Cinematic Universe had, which meant awkwardly cramming a lot of setup into this movie. Now in Snyder's defense, I'm not convinced this is entirely his fault. I'm pretty sure Warner Brothers can take most of the blame for this one. I also shit on the MCU a lot, but one thing I cannot fault for them is their planning. Warner Brothers didn't seem to have nearly as good a plan as the MCU did, and it really shows in this movie. But I'll come back to that point later when I go over the screenplay. My point is, Diana feels crammed into this movie more than anything else, and that is such a shame because, as I said, I love her character and I would have liked to see her more organically weaved into this movie if she was gonna have to be there at all. I'm actually not going to be as mean to the directing style of this movie as I was to Man of Steel, because for everything else I dislike about this movie, the direction is actually better for my money. For a start, I did not see as many of my cursed enemy, the snap zoom, and for the most part, the camera work was not as nausea-inducing. There are several sequences of this movie that I think are actually shot pretty well, which includes the funeral scenes, the warehouse fight scene, Metropolis from Bruce's point of view, and a couple of others. There weren't any shots that wholesale offended me in this movie, and honestly, that's a bit of a step up. However, I still have things to whine about, because of course I do. The color grading problems are back with a vengeance. This movie makes Man of Steel look positively vibrant in places. The problem is that it's most noticeable when Wonder Woman enters the fight. Her red, blue, and gold costume takes on a brownish bronze look for most of her screen time, which is a dreadful shame because later movies have shown the colors in that costume way better. And of course, these same issues plague any scene Superman is in, making his blue suit look almost gray. I'm fairly certain nobody's going to notice the difference when he's wearing his black suit in the Snyder cut. And what this movie lacked in snap zooms, it well made up for in unnecessary slow motion. The entire scene at the beginning of the Waynes getting gunned down for the nth time in cinema history is entirely in slow motion. And it's kind of grating if I'm going to be honest. Now, slow motion is a useful tool, do not get me wrong, but I continue to be mystified by the sheer amount to which it is used in action movies and especially superhero movies. Unless someone is running at super speed, why do you need slow motion except for the occasional emphasis? But there's just tons of it in this movie, and it begins to get a bit tiring after a while. One particularly silly instance in my mind was during Superman's funeral when we get a slow motion shot of a cannon shell dropping to the ground. I know it was supposed to be kind of dramatic, but it just looks silly to me, I'm sorry. Also, the CGI on Doomsday is ass. I'm not really exaggerating much when I say he looks like a Rocky version of the Amazing Bulk. David S. Goyer returns to the screenplay credits for this one, and either Zack Snyder kept passing him notes on how it wanted to be written, or everything good about his Dark Knight trilogy screenplays came from Christopher Nolan. I'm not really sure which of the two is true, but I imagine I won't get an answer on that one anytime soon. So like I did last time, I'm going to go through everything that happens in this movie beat for beat to explain why it just doesn't add up. So in the great tradition of Batman-involved movies, the film once again begins with the death of the Waynes. Now, again, I'm aware that it is a meme to make fun of Batman movies movies constantly showing the Waynes die, but for heaven's sake, people, we get it. They're fucking dead. We know. And sure, I get that it later becomes relevant for the Martha moment, and A, I have my thoughts on that moment, which we will get to, and B, if we needed to show the Waynes dying to underscore the Martha moment, wouldn't it make more sense to use it then and not begin the movie with a nearly 5-minute rendition of that scene in slow motion? Just a thought, guys. So then the flashback to the Wayne's death scene becomes a dream sequence, I guess. Why is this here? Like, thematically, what does this add to the movie? And what does this beautiful lie nonsense have to do with anything? I don't understand. And now we get to the moment where I think the movie actually should have started, the Battle of Metropolis. Now, I did say earlier that I quite like this scene and that it, for the most part, kind of slaps, but that doesn't mean I don't think there's some dumb shit in it, so let's get it started. To begin with, what exactly is Bruce's plan here? He hears that Metropolis is under attack by an alien force, so his immediate plan is to helicopter into Metropolis to, what, tell him to get out? What's wrong with a phone call? I mean, we use his mobile phone just seconds later, so what was the plan? And on top of that, why isn't the Wayne building already evacuated well before Bruce gets here? There is a whole ass alien spaceship rocking your shit, and you're not already running for the fire exits? I don't care what Wayne is paying me. If I saw that shit, I'd book it like I was Barry Allen, the fastest man alive. And then the movie expects us to care that Wayne's branch manager, I guess, fucking dies because he didn't evacuate earlier? Nah, fam, not giving a shit about that. From there, we go to the fictional country of Naomi, Africa to begin a plotline so pointless that the Wikipedia article for this movie makes no mention of it at all. And it begins with Lois Lane getting an interview with the leader of the terrorist cell, somehow. In tow with her is intrepid photographer Jimmy Olsen, who quickly turns out to be a CIA agent and then fucking dies. Is it so much to ask that just one Superman movie write a half-decent Jimmy Olsen? Please, just once. I'm begging at this point. So now the terrorists have Lois captured, at which point Superman appears, because he magically knows that Lois is in trouble from across the planet, I guess, murders this guy and saves Lois's life. And then the Luthor double agents appear to kill these guys to frame Superman for murder, to make him look bad. Do you see my frustration with this whole thing yet? Now we cut to a congressional hearing where a woman named Kahina Ziri, who this movie cares so little about that I actually had to go to the IMDb page for this movie to find her name, testifies that Superman was responsible for the mass murder of the terrorists because of what she claimed to see from a long way away. And this is, by the way, the only thing in the movie that could in any way implicate Superman for killing all those terrorists that he didn't smash through a wall and then burning their bodies. And as it turns out later, she's lying anyway because Luthor got to her at some point, I guess, but then she decides to tell the truth and then is shoved out of the movie. Then we get a scene we absolutely don't need of Lois in the bath contemplating things that happened to her in Naomi. Now this scene wouldn't be so irritating to me if it went for two things. One, it's about all the character development Lois gets in this movie, and otherwise she's still the vessel through which the plot happens that she was in Man of Steel. And two, her being in the bath just really feels like some nude Amy Adams eye candy. It just seems unnecessary to me. And then Clark gets into the bath with her fully clothed. My guy, there is water all over that floor. What the fuck are you doing? How could you not even stop to take your socks off either? Ugh, I hate wax socks. And now we meet this version of Lex Luthor, who is introduced playing basketball in the foyer of his building. I guess this was trying to make him look young and hip, but instead it makes him look like an asshole. Here he is meeting Senator Finch in order to ask her about an import license for a big-ass nugget of kryptonite his people found in the Indian Ocean, and for access to General Zod's corpse, even though it's established that he already had access to it when they found out kryptonite was dangerous to Kryptonians, and access to the wrecked Kryptonian ship that crashed in Metropolis. Now, I might be wrong here, but wouldn't you asking a senator for this kind of access to be the wrong way to go about it? Wouldn't you need some permissions from someone else? This is actually a genuine question. I really want to know. I don't understand American politics because that shit's whack. Also, the sheer concept that LexCorp completely rebuilt Metropolis in 18 months is one of the most unbelievable parts of this movie. And that's saying something. We now get to a scene in the Daily Planet, which is mostly completely inconsequential, as scenes in the Daily Planet tend to be in Superman movies, but this one seems to have a complete misunderstanding of how a newspaper works. Like, Perry White just moves his journalists from department to department at will, just based on what day it is.
Kevin, your sports today.
And then dictates headlines to his journalists before they even have a story on his desk.
Jenny, headline. End of love affair with man in the sky, question mark.
We get more of the Naomi subplot, and now there is proof enough that bullets were used to kill those terrorists that Lois is able to find out about it. So why does the government still consider him on the hook for killing these guys? If he's gonna be done for killing anyone, it should be that guy he put through the wall. But the movie never even addresses that, instead focusing on the people that it can be proven Superman didn't kill. Senator Finch pays Lex an in-person visit to tell him his import license has been blocked because nobody in the Snyderverse seems to have heard of using a telephone, but high key doesn't matter anyway because Luthor ends up bringing the kryptonite into the country without one later there anyway. So why did he need to ask for an import license at all? Couldn't he have just asked for the access to the Kryptonian ship and General Zod? And if he had to mention the kryptonite, why not just keep the conversation of that one shard he already had in the country? We get another dream sequence nobody cares about, and then it's on to the Metropolis Gallery Gala, which Clark and Bruce have both been invited to. Bruce wants to go so he can steal some info about kryptonite and ship from Luthor, and Clark is only invited there because excitement? It's there that we get this moment between Clark and Bruce, which looked kind of cool in the trailers, but in context it doesn't make a lot of sense because given how we've seen Superman behave in this movie, the way he talks about Batman sounds kind of hypocritical, which Bruce does call out, but not for exactly the reason I'm thinking about here. Then Lex Luthor sees the two of them talking and then says this.
Boys, Bruce Wayne meets Clark Kent. I love it. I love bringing people together.
Literally, the only way this line makes sense is if Lex Luthor knows who Bruce and Clark are, which it turns out later, of course he does, but you would think that that just might tip off Bruce and Clark that there's some fuckery afoot and to be more wary of Luthor than of each other, because why would Luthor be so excited about some reporter meeting this big billionaire otherwise? He wouldn't. But we don't have time to think about that because the movie is now moving on, giving us a nice little montage of Superman saving people and some other kind of relevant scenes before we get to Bruce and Diana meeting at another art gallery, which again doesn't amount to a lot. And then it's on to another dream sequence. Now, this whole Injustice dream sequence premonition thing is, for its credit, well shot and decently directed. If it were its own short film set in the Injustice universe, I think it's kinda neat actually. There's a clear through line of Bruce trying to find kryptonite to take down the evil Superman, but getting betrayed, and it works. Henry Cavill is actually pretty convincing as an evil Superman. In fact, I almost wait, is that a gun in Batman's hands? Never mind, this scene is complete shit, 0 out of 10. Then Bruce wakes up to see the Flash trying to get a message to him, and then wakes up again, but those papers floating in the background tell you that Flash was actually there. This moment serves no purpose in the movie aside from setting up future movies. I mean, at least the Injustice dream serves to set up that Bruce doesn't trust Superman, but the Flash thing has nothing to do with anything, and it just leaves me confused. So now Bruce shows up to put a tracker on the truck that'll transport the kryptonite to wherever Luthor wants it taken. But then, instead of letting the tracker do its thing so he can go and find the kryptonite later, he chases the truck in the Batmobile and fucking murders everyone in its convoy. Because pew pew pew, chase scene, I guess. So now Superman shows up, and this is the first time we get anything that looks like a Batman versus Superman confrontation. We are, by the way, an hour into this movie, and then it's all over in 30 seconds. Like, Superman threatens to fucking murder Batman if he ever goes to his bat signal again and just pieces out, but not before Batman gives us the good old "do you bleed" line. The absolutely hilarious thing about this moment is after this, Clark's original motivation of wanting to stop the Batman because he thinks he's too violent vanishes from the movie, like it's never mentioned again. The next time they meet, he has a completely different motivation to deal with Bruce. So now we come back to the Narrow Enemy subplot, which I'd honestly forgotten about, and Kahina goes to Senator Finch and announces that she was lying and she wants to tell the truth to Congress to clear Superman's name. Now, I'm not an expert on these Congress hearings, but doesn't that mean she just admitted to perjury? Wouldn't she get done for that? Guess not, because we're moving on to Lois finally piecing together that someone was actively trying to frame Superman, and seems to realize that this plan to frame him only worked if she was in Narrow Enemy talking to these terrorists. And this moment in the movie is played as some kind of gotcha scene, but in actual fact, it just raises the question of how Lex knew Superman would magically appear to rescue Lois. Like, at the moment Lois was in Narrow Enemy, he could have been getting a cat out of a tree or saving someone halfway across the world from drowning or something. The odds of this plan working out the way it did are just stacked against Luthor, and yet it worked because the screenplay said so. We go back to DC to the new hearing where Luthor is mouthing off at Finch, and elsewhere in the city, Kahina is getting murdered in broad daylight to stop her from testifying for Superman without a single soul noticing it happen. Someone should have seen that. We then get a callback to that stupid granny speech tea line from earlier, which seems to imply that Luthor pissed in a jar just for a sort of gotcha moment, and then wheelchair guy detonates and everyone fucking dies. Oh, and because everyone in this world has the rational thinking skills of someone 5 years of age, everyone seems to think Superman did it, which admittedly he doesn't help by flying off when there's still people inside the building. Also, Lex totally just left Mercy Graves to die in there. Like, she's supposed to be Lex's personal assistant, but in this movie, she mostly just stands around looking cool and then fucking dies because I guess Lex wanted a cool movie visual. Rest in peace, Mercy, we hardly knew you. So now we get a quick moment of Lex reacting to the fact that Batman broke into his shit and stole the kryptonite. All this moment does is raise the question of why we got that moment of Batman fucking murdering people earlier, when instead he could have placed a tracker, backed away, and then given us a kick-ass scene of Batman breaking into Lex's shit and stealing the kryptonite. Like, I can guarantee you, Batman duking it out with LexCorp henchmen hand-to-hand in a hallway would have been a million times better than Batman riddling a car with bullets. But oh well, I guess. So Clark mopes off to God knows where to have a conference with his dead dad, and meanwhile Lex is in the Genesis chamber of the Kryptonian ship with General Zod's body ready to create Doomsday. How does he know how to work the ship? How does he know that the Genesis chamber can make Doomsday? How does he even learn what Doomsday is before the computer helpfully explains it to the audience? Pfft, we don't have time for questions like that. All the pieces are in place for Lex's incoherent master plan. Now all he needs to do is kidnap Martha and Lois to get the ball properly rolling. Across the bay, Batman is prepped for battle against Superman with his big kryptonite spear of super murder and his big metal fighting suit. Of course, Batman being ready to fight Superman at the same time as Lex's plan falling into place is pretty convenient timing. It's not like Bruce and Lex have been coordinating together on this little battle, so how would Bruce know Clark would come to fight? And how did Lex know when everything would get on the road too? Sheer bloody coincidence that everything happens at the same time for this battle to take place. That's pretty irritating. Lois is brought to the top of the LexCorp building and then is promptly thrown off, which is Lex's whole plan to summon Superman. And against all logic, it works. Like, someone please explain to me how Superman appears whenever Lois is in danger. He's not omniscient, for heaven's sake. What would have happened to Lex's plan if Superman was off saving someone else at the time and Lois had just splattered onto the pavement below?
Well, that gets knackered then, innit?
Hell, I honestly would have preferred if he used that dog whistle device to summon him like he did in the 1978 Superman movie, because that would have at least made sense. Also, how is Clark always there to save Lois when she gets in trouble, but when it's his own mother, he's nowhere to be seen? That's a little stupid. So Lex monologues his evil plan at Clark, and instead of flying off at super speed and scanning all of Metropolis and Gotham with his X-ray vision or some shit to save Martha himself, which I'm pretty confident he could have done, he decides to fly off to find Batman to recruit him in helping find Martha. Or at least that's what he seems to want to do. But all he does is say shit like, listen to me, and you don't understand, and crap like that. How hard would it be to cap off with, Lex Luthor has kidnapped my mother and he's gonna kill her, can we settle this shit later? Even if Batman doesn't listen, he still could have at least made an attempt. Oh, also between his listen to me's and you don't understand, he's still throwing Batman around a little bit. Like, are you here for a Barney or not, man? Make up your mind. Also, I feel I should note that the battle that this movie is named after doesn't happen until 2 hours into its runtime. Make of that what you will. Now, a lot of people have memed on Clark and Bruce knowing who each other are, but I actually think that can be explained reasonably. I mean, Clark got that hella X-ray vision, so he definitely could have looked under Batman's mask and seen Bruce, so that I don't really mind. And Bruce knowing who Clark is just adds up. He is, after all, the world's greatest detective. So I'm actually gonna say that I like that they know who each other are. It's not terrible. Anyway, Batman begins his attack with sound cannons and then machine guns, because those are gonna do any damage at all to Superman, I guess. And then the battle begins proper. I wish I had things to say about it, but for the most part, it's just visual noise with the occasional kryptonite smoke bomb. So Batman leads the battle back to where he stored the kryptonite spear, which seems just about impossible to me, given that Superman was the one who smashed Batman from building to building a couple of minutes earlier. And then he raises the spear to make the kill. But then it happens. The most heartbreaking work of staggering genius in film history. And I speak of no other than...
Why did you say that name?
The Martha moment. This moment has been memed to death, so I'll try my hardest to keep my thoughts on this as brief as possible. But come on, the scene sucks. Now, I will give everyone involved a little credit. I can see what they were trying to do. You have a man who's blinded by his own emotional issues, ready to kill someone because he's completely dehumanized him. He says, "You were never even a man," before he strikes as if to reassure himself of this. I've already waxed lyrical about how I don't think that fit into Bruce Wayne's character at all, but bear with me here. So he's about to murder this person he's trying not to see as a man, and then his dying words are a cry for his mother. And in that moment, everything shatters and he can't kill this person anymore. Conceptually, I get it. So don't come at me saying I hate it because I don't understand it. I understand it just fine. I think the execution is complete shit. That's all. The problem with the execution is the dialogue involved seems to desperately want it to be about the fact that their mothers are both named Martha instead of the actual thematic thing I just described. Like, it all begins with Clark screaming, "You're letting them kill Martha!" And let me just ask you, who talks like this in real life? If Clark were written like an actual person, he might have shouted something like, "They're gonna kill my mother!" Or, "If you do this, you're letting my mother die!" Or something along those lines. And don't ask where this voice is coming from, I really don't know. He definitely would not have called for her by name, but he does, and that in turn leads to the infinitely memeable, "Why did you say that name?" Like, Batman loses his absolute fucking shit here just because Clark mentioned somebody with the same name as his mother. And he keeps screaming it over and over. And then the movie has the audacity to cut to the Wayne murders again just so we can hear Thomas say, "Martha," to drive the point home. I'm trying to take this seriously, but I just can't. I don't even have words to express how badly written it is. Oh, and Lois is here for some reason too. And now I can hear some people ask, "Oh, well, how would have you done it then?" Glad you asked. What I would have done is this. So we'll assume everything else about this movie is the same, and we wind up at this moment with Batman being ready to execute Superman. He raises his spear ready for the kill, and then Superman cries out something like, "Don't do this, he's gonna kill my mother!" And then Batman would be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And then Superman would be like, "If you do this, he's gonna kill my mother!" And then Batman would be shook. And sure, we'll keep the flashback to his parents' murder because it's thematically relevant. Not because his mother's name is Martha now, but because he remembers the pain of losing a parent and how it's the core foundation of his no-killing rule. He'll waver for a bit, and then Superman will say, "Please," in a strangled, near-death voice, and then Batman's composure would break, and he'll throw the spear to his side, and maybe for effect he'll scream angrily. Maybe then we'd get some dialogue about how he'd let himself pretend Superman was a man, and how he'd betrayed not only himself but also his parents or some shit. Is this a perfect scene I've just written? Probably not, but I came up with that shit off the top of my head, and it still makes more sense than what we got. So if some burnt-out university student with a bad attitude can come up with something that's actually closer to what you were trying to do with your scene than what you actually turned out, and doesn't have the dumbest dialogue this side of the Star Wars prequel trilogy, what the hell are you on, guys? Jesus, tap dancing Christ. Oh yeah, Lois also wouldn't be there because she doesn't need to be.
Now, where was I?
Now Clark and Bruce are best buds. Lois is tossing the spear down the well for no good reason, and Bruce is off to save Martha while Clark goes off to nail Lex to the wall. Bruce manages to locate Martha with only a couple minutes to spare because conveniently one of the people guarding her is this Russian guy attached to Luthor that Bruce was stalking at the beginning of the movie. So he goes in and beats the shit out of Luthor's guys and saves Martha. I'm not doing that again, I promise. And just at that moment, Clark arrives at the Kryptonian ship to find Lex. But just at that moment, out comes Doomsday, ready to destroy Superman and everything else. But more importantly to Lex, Superman. Also, can we just talk about how well timed that was? Like, Lex's original plan fails and then 2 seconds later his backup is raring to go. That's really, really convenient timing. So Doomsday unleashes an energy surge of destruction porn, and then Superman grabs him and starts launching him into space, which is the smartest thing he's done all movie, if I'm being honest. The US government takes this opportunity and decides to nuke them. The only effects of this, however, is to supercharge Doomsday and to serve as a Superman death fake out a few moments before he actually dies. And that can go right to hell. Batman realizes he needs the kryptonite spear, so he decides to lead Doomsday away from the very uninhabited island he's currently on towards a city, as opposed to turning around, finding the spear, and then coming back to the island to kill Doomsday. Why? Because we need more things to explode, I guess. And now here's Wonder Woman to save the day, and I wish I could be excited to see her, but she still feels awkwardly shoved in this movie, so I really can't. Superman comes back and the three of them fight Doomsday, and the whole time Batman doesn't die, somehow. Superman then gets the kryptonite spear, stabs Doomsday with it, but then gets stabbed by Doomsday and fucking dies. My favorite superhero of all time is dead, and I feel absolutely nothing. It's just so much wrong with it that I can't take it seriously. I mean, we all know it's not gonna be permanent, so what's the point in doing it at all? If you have the absolute burning need to do the Death of Superman storyline, the second movie of your extended universe is exactly the wrong place to do that, let me tell you. Because when the death of Superman happened in the comics, it was huge and had some very real consequences, even if Superman did end up coming back. Here it just feels like it's being used for cheap drama, and that shit sucks. It just comes off as extremely disingenuous, and I honestly felt cheated watching the movie when this happened. So Clark and Superman each get a funeral and everyone is really sad. Bruce goes to Clark's grave afterwards and monologues as if he's known Clark his whole life, which feels pretty disingenuous. And then the movie's over, but not before we get some quick Justice League foreshadowing in the form of Steppenwolf appearing to Lex Luthor for some reason. No, seriously, what's he doing here? Oh yeah, I'm making fun of the dialogue in this movie too. Let's go!
In the dream, they took me to the light. A beautiful lie.
Are you a terrorist, General?
I just don't know if it's possible for you to love me and be you.
A silver bullet to keep in reserve to use against the Kryptonians, so the day does not come, madame, when your children are waving daisies at a reviewing stand. It's Cherry.
Well, there's a new kind of mean in him.
Probably some old charity crone who's got a thing for nerds.
Maybe one day Dad'll come back if I just keep everything the same. That is silly. The red capes are coming. The red capes are coming.
Take a bucket of piss and call it Granny's peach tea.
Hi, hello, Lex, it is a pleasure. Ow, wow, that is a good grip. You should not pick a fight with this person.
I can't even piss standing up.
You know, with balls like yours, you belong in here.
Nobody cares about Clark Kent taking on the Batman.
Is it stealing if you steal from another thief? You know, it's true what they say about little boys.
If we believe there's even a 1% chance that he is our enemy, we have to take it as an absolute certainty.
The bat is dead. Bury it.
Tell me, do you bleed? You will.
You are gonna be on the hot seat in there, Junebug.
You're psychotic.
That is a 3-syllable word for any thought too big for little minds. Wrong category, boy. No, boy, do we have problems up here. Black and blue. Fight night. Martha, Martha, Martha. Mother of God! Would you look at the time? When you came here, you had an hour. Now it's less.
You're letting him kill Martha. Why did you say that name?
I don't hate the sinner. I hate the sin. And yours, my friend, is existing.
She with you?
I thought she was with you.
He's hungry.
These people just stand and watch the destruction of Metropolis. Death wish much? That kid just stands there and waits for death. How did Bruce see Superman and Zod from so far away? Lex feeding that man sweets. That's it, that's the tweet. Those eggs are super fake. Ben Affleck's arse. That's it. The sheer concept that Clark Kent doesn't know who Bruce Wayne is. Lex losing his shit in front of a bunch of rich people. That's actually kind of funny. Why would Clark ask Bruce about the bat aside from just drama? Lock the door in that computer room, you assholes. Like, if people keep walking into it, that's your fault if shit gets stolen. This political montage is irritating and heavy-handed. The S on the roof might look cool, but I don't understand why someone would stop in the middle of a flood to paint one. So the Ultimate Edition, the R-rated cut, is the one with the F-bomb. They still could have had F-bomb in the PG-13 cut, right? So why exactly is the Ultimate Edition R-rated? Does this movie expect me to care about that rapist who got shivved? Because I don't. I'm kind of glad he's fucking dead. John Stewart. That's not the John Stewart I want in the DC universe, guys. I think the scene is pointless, but the waltz in the background was also in Eyes Wide Shut, so it gets a point for that, I guess. Wait, how does the Genesis device recognize Zod's body, but only recognizes Lex when he cuts himself? Wouldn't it be picking up Lex's genetic material because he's standing in it? Why do Batman's eyes glow in his suit? Is it just because they thought it would look cool? The geography between Metropolis and Gotham is fucked. Like, why are they just across the bay from each other? Is it just so you could have the cool visual of the bat signal being visible from Metropolis? Because I think it is. Also, how are they just across the bay from each other? In every city I have ever been in, if two places are that close together, they tend to be suburbs of a bigger city, like Vancouver and North Vancouver. Also, in general comics history, since when have Metropolis and Gotham being right next to each other? I get the geography of cities in comics isn't really very specific, but I'm fairly certain Metropolis and Gotham have never been right next to each other. The Polaroids are just for cool visual, no other reason. Perry just goes with Lois's request for a helicopter, because Batman seems to revel in Clark's pain. So the kryptonite expires after, what, 30 seconds? That's good to know. Oh, but Batman can still stop him in his tracks, I guess. Consistency. So Lois, without knowing anything about what's going on, thinks to herself, gee, that spear would be nice, because she read the script, I guess? Oh no, not another, oh no, Lois is in danger, whatever will Clark do moment.
'Tis but a scratch.
A scratch? Your arm's off.
No, it isn't.
And then Superman grabs the kryptonite spear and is somehow able to fly holding it to kill Doomsday. Sure. Honestly, the way they make Lex Luthor bold in this universe is kind of subpar. Why is Perry at the printing press for this Superman special? Is it just for the visual? Night of Terror, Morning of Loss should have a comma in there somewhere. This Batman appearance is some scripted ass bullshit. And the dirt rising off the grave can suck my I really feel like had Dawn of Justice been multiple movies, it would have fared better. You could have done a Man of Steel 2 about him going against a new villain whilst facing the consequences of the destruction of Metropolis and rolled the Congress stuff into that. You could have done a movie where people pit Batman and Superman against each other. Hell, further down the line, if you really wanted to, you could do Death of Superman. These are all solid ideas, but rolling them all into one single movie seems ill-advised at best. As a result, we have a movie with some extremely weird pacing, where very little that anybody does seems to make any sense. I know the common comment is to make sure to watch the Ultimate Edition so everything makes sense, and I did so. I'm gonna be honest, it still wasn't all that clear to me most of the time. I can hardly imagine how much of a mess the theatrical cut must have been if this is more coherent. At least the worst parts of the theatrical cut weren't really Snyder's fault, I suppose, but the extra half hour of the Ultimate Edition doesn't magically fix everything, unfortunately. Well, that's Dawn of Justice done. I can safely say after finishing the editing on this video, I will never watch this movie again. So it's just not worth the headache to me. In the meantime, keep an eye out for when I drop the next in this series, when the Snyder cut of Justice League finally drops on HBO Max, and I give that a fair chance. I promise you, I will give it a fair chance. I don't go into these movies wanting to hate them. I can promise you that. I want to like Snyder's Justice League movie. Oh, Jesus, 4 hours. I'm not getting this done in one sitting though. You can't make me.